All right. Good morning again, everyone. This is Tracy Underwood with the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I coordinate our economic justice project here at the coalition and host these quarterly money talks. So thank you for joining us during Pandemic Money Talk. Um, Hopefully, this will be the only Pandemic Money Talk, but I don't know. There might be another one in August. We'll see. Please bear with us since I'm at home and we're all remote right now. I'm hoping there won't be any technical difficulties, but I feel like we should just anticipate technical difficulties at this point with this kind of thing. I hope everybody's doing well this Monday morning. And I want to go ahead and get started and dig into this information on economic resources that are available because of this COVID-19 pandemic and the things that it has caused. So there'll be plenty of time for questions. There are a lot of resources linked in this PowerPoint, and everybody uh, after the money talk will get the PowerPoint in your inboxes so that you can have that on hand. So you don't have to like take notes or memorize anything. The links will be there for you after the meeting or the training. Oh, that's me. Um, and my information. So it's best if you email me these days. I do have a phone number, an office number, but I'm not in my office right now. And I'm faster over email, even when I am in the office. So shoot me an email at any point. If you have questions about this stuff, questions about money and how survivors can access, financial resources and that kind of thing, because that is what I love talking about. Our agenda, a few little housekeeping and technical assistance pieces. We'll talk about a bit of framing about why we're talking about money and all of this money stuff and survivors. We'll dig in, hopefully not too far into the weeds, but as far as y'all need me to go, or as far as I can go into the weeds on some federal financial supports, state financial supports. And then what I really want to hear, I want to spend some time hearing from you about what's happening in your community. Like how are these things playing out? Where are they working? Where are they not? What does survivors need right now that that we're not thinking about or that we haven't talked about, or that we can at the coalition help you figure out? We want to know what that looks like for you, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, let's dig into the topic of economic resources during COVID-19. So, a little bit of framing of our reality, which should be, moments for most of you on the call, but obviously stay-at-home orders are hitting survivors really hard. And as an example of that, the SPD the Seattle Police Department reported a 21% increase in DV calls in March. So just that month. We've heard it on the news, and I'm sure you're hearing it from the survivors that are calling in, those that can reach you in the ways that they can reach you right now. I'm sure you are having that be a particular, that is very obvious to you at this point. We also know that poverty, even in regular times when there's not a pandemic, poverty increases somebody's risk for experiencing domestic violence, because when you don't have economic resources in this world that we live in, you're less safe. You don't have as many options to choose something that might be safer for you. And these stay-at-home orders multiply this risk for survivors experiencing poverty. So there's a lot sort of coming together to create a particular disaster for survivors. It's a crisis for all of us, and in particular, survivors are being hit very hard. Hardship is further multiplied for Black, Brown, and Native survivors, who are also being more severely impacted by the virus. And we know that health and healthcare and illness impacts folks not only, you know, physically, but also economically as well in this world that we live. So that's all just to say that I think the reason why we're thinking about this and talking about this in particular, particularly around money, and why I've dug into economic supports and resources in general, is because survivors, you know, are safer when they have more resources, when they have more money. And this particular pandemic has really brought to light some of the places where our current system, our current economic capitalist system that is based on work and money, right? Like, has not really spent the time it needed, like, and the money it needed to create safety nets for folks. Like, the safety nets we thought we had, which many of us knew weren't all that adequate to begin with, are really, really, really inadequate in this situation. And so it it reveals that, but it also is an enormous opportunity right now for us to be thinking about, well, what will work and how can we change things to you know, make it better for everybody in the long term. So while it seems a little bit depressing, all of those things that I just laid out, I am like the worst at parties, let me tell you. It also, I think I have a lot of hope as well, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And we're going to dig into the nitty gritty for like practical sake today in this webinar. But I also want us all to be thinking about, like, you know, WSCDF is going to be thinking about how, like, what Washington State in particular, like how we can create systems that are more economically supportive for folks in Washington, for all folks in Washington, which will inevitably benefit survivors because there are so many survivors, and also because, you know, not everybody who is dealing with domestic violence comes through our doors and y'all's doors and like our programs doors. And so just be on the lookout for that kind of stuff as we move forward, as we move through this pandemic and beyond. And you know, because we all sort of need to help our lawmakers and other folks understand the connection between, like, why a domestic violence coalition and why domestic violence programs are talking about economic supports or taxes or, you know, those sorts of things. And this is just a time that has made it really, really clear, I think, for me, and hopefully for others as well, that like social safety nets, strong leave policies, strong paid leave policies, and other economic supports around work and workers and people make us all safer and more stable in our relationships. So that's something that I really, you'll be hearing more from me about throughout the next, you know, year or so. And yeah, I think we are at a place where we have a really interesting opportunity to make some big change. So there's a little hope for you today before we dig into the nitty gritty of like what's available and what's not. All right. Can't go forward. There we go. All right. So let's dig into a little bit of the federal financial supports that are out there for folks. Okay. So from the feds, we have the $1,200 individual payments plus the $500 child payments. Talk a little bit more about those in a sec. Extended paid sick leave, expanded and additional unemployment protections, and also the Paycheck Protection Program, which is for small businesses and organizations. All right, the relief payments. So many folks have already received their $1,200 per adult relief payments. Those came automatically into bank accounts if you had direct deposit and have filed taxes in the last year or even couple of years. So that's that should have already, for most people, should have already come through, especially if you have direct deposit. For those folks who filed taxes but don't have direct deposit, which you might be working with some survivors who that's the case, the checks are slow, so they may not have their payment yet. For those that didn't file taxes, they can register to get their relief payments on the IRS website. And I have a link a little bit later in this on that. So, and there's a fact sheet from NNEDV with a lot more information about the relief payments, which is handy, plus the link to the IRS website for those who don't file taxes to register for their relief payments. So that can happen even if you didn't file taxes, you can get that relief payment. The child relief payments are an additional $500 per qualifying child. Again, if you file taxes or on certain federal benefits, those stimulus payments came right through to bank accounts or whatnot, or will be automatically added to the checks once the checks end up in the mail. For non-filers, there was a form to fill out on the IRS website, but the deadline has passed for filing for the child relief payment, which is super annoying. They set a really ridiculous timeline, and I think it got extended by like a week. Advocates may still be trying to work on reopening that, but as of now, if folks didn't receive the child payment, the child additional $500 relief payment for a qualifying child, because they weren't filers, tax filers, and they weren't able to get to that IRS web form in time before the deadline passed, they can still get the $500 per qualifying child, but not until next year after they file a tax return at this point. And there's a link, that link there that I have has more information about that. But that's unfortunate. Stay tuned, because I know people were trying to figure out a way to open that back up, or get folks their payments sooner, because the timeline for when folks found out they needed to apply for that and when it closed was ridiculous. All right, child support. So like I said that a lot of folks may have already gotten their $1,200 payments, relief payments. However, for those who are non-custodial parents involved with the Division of Child Support, their relief payment might have been delayed, because if they are a non-custodial parent through the Division of Child Support, all of those payments, like our state Division of Child Support was getting all the relief payments from all the non-custodial parents, and so they had to figure out what to do with those. So basically, DCS, the Division of Child Support, put a 30-day hold on all of those payments. So if you are working with survivors who are either involved with the Division of Child Support getting child support, or if you're working with a survivor who is a non-custodial parent, this might be the answer to the question of where's my relief? Where's my relief payment? So they've put a 30-day hold whenever they get one of the relief payments, in order to determine, how much of that payment goes towards the custodial parent's child support payments, goes towards any child support that's owed, or any debt owed to the state. And then if any goes back to the non-custodial parent. So they're sort of holding on that to figure all that stuff out. Non-custodial parents can appeal during this time, during this 30 days. So that's also another reason why they're putting a hold, because they also realize that there may be some situations where non-custodial parents have lost their jobs, and for whatever reason want to appeal and say, I need that $1,200 payment, rather than it paying for my back debt, right? Like I really that's actually gonna mean, me being able to put food on the table, or stay in my house, and that kind of a thing. So if you're working with non-custodial parents who are survivors, or even not, even if you're working with, even if you're working with custodial parents who have, who don't want the non-custodial parent of their kids to not get that payment right now, because it might mean safety for them right now, because it might make them less agitated and less angry, or like, less likely to take it out on them, right? Then that non-custodial parent can appeal, and ask for the relief payment to be sent back to them because of economic hardship. So DCS is trying to figure out, is making decisions, based on what people are asking for during this time. I can imagine it's not, it sounds messy, and I can imagine it is. So I would love to know if folks are dealing with this, or as you talk to survivors about this, if this is the first you've heard about it, and that they do try and work with Division of Child Support to figure out these payments. I would love to know how that's going, because it's a lot of extra work and different kind of work than the child support enforcement officers usually do. And so, it's a new situation for everyone, let's just say. Oh, I have a question here in the questions box I see. It says, if you ever had filed an identity fraud, you couldn't get a PIN reissued or a new one. Samantha, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Is it the PIN? So if a survivor said that their identity had been stolen, maybe by their abuser, through the IRS, then there was some trickiness around getting these payments. Is that what you're saying? You want to tell me a little bit more about that?
What it is that if you've ever filed identity theft for any reason, and they issued you that PIN to use that year for your taxes,
yeah,
you had to remember that PIN again, because that's what was required of people when they went to go fill their direct deposit information out with the IRS.
Yeah.
And if you didn't remember that PIN, there's nobody there at the IRS working to reissue a PIN, reissue you it, or to get you the PIN again. So therefore, you couldn't file it electronically, and you had to figure out what the address was to send it somewhere, because it says you can print it off, but they do not give you no address to send it to.
Oy. Okay. Well,
that's if you ever had filed identity theft, and you need to remember the original PIN they sent you.
Okay, that is good information. Thank you for that. It does sound like, I mean, generally they should be able to reissue you a PIN, but it sounds like they just can't because like nobody's around.
Yeah, nobody's working, so it's pretty.
Okay, they should be working from home. So like that is, the IRS can work from home. So hopefully that maybe that will get smoother as this goes along, but like that is good information. And let me know if others are having that issue. I can try and dig around to see if there's somebody, to see if somebody knows like which department they're supposed to email about that kind of a thing. Like maybe there is a faster route to getting that PIN reissued. Thank you for that. Okay, we have other folks saying that they have people who are having that same challenge with the IRS. Okay, I will dig around and see if I can find info on how to a more streamlined way to get that PIN reissued, because that does seem like it would be something a lot of survivors would be facing, since I'm sure a lot of survivors have had to file identity fraud with the IRS. Okay. Are there any questions about the child support stuff? Anybody, and has anybody, if anybody has like experienced this already, or has already had to deal or help somebody navigate this? All right, so paid leave. I mean, we are fortunate in this state to have statewide paid sick and safe leave. There are some states and some folks that, don't have that extra protection. So it's a little something that we already had here on the books that people had access to. In addition to that, there are some new expansions through the federal government on paid leave that only apply to employers with under 500 employees. So employers with under 500 employees, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, which was the one before the CARES Act, gives 2 weeks or up to 80 hours of paid family and medical leave at the full rate of pay if you're quarantined by a healthcare provider or due to government directive, or if you have COVID-19 symptoms. So up to 2 weeks with full pay. It also allows for 2 weeks of pay at 2/3 of the full rate if you need to take leave to care for someone who is subject to quarantine. And there's an additional 10 weeks of paid leave at 2/3 your full rate if you cannot work because your child's school or childcare is closed because of COVID-19. There are a few exceptions to this last piece of the 10 weeks of paid leave. Employers with under 50 employees might be exempted from the 10-week extension because of hardship. And employers will receive tax credits to offset the costs of additional paid leave. That's actually for all of it, not just for the 10 extra additional weeks, but for the 2 weeks of full pay, the 2 weeks of 2/3 of the full rate pay if somebody is taking leave to care for someone else who's subject to quarantine, and they aren't subject to quarantine themselves. Right now in Washington, we're all subject to quarantine. Most of us are subject to quarantine. So that would be like the full rate. But depending on your job, if you are essential employee, then it might not apply. But there's more info in the link that I have there. It is, I'm unsure exactly how small businesses or organizations, like if you're an administrator at one of the domestic violence organizations and you've logged in, like this is, so what the law says is that employers will receive tax credits to offset the cost of additional paid leave that you have to offer, right? Because of this federal rule. Some of the fine print that I read did say that if the costs of offering this go above the amount of tax credits that you'd receive, then there will be a process to apply through the Department of the Treasury and the IRS to get reimbursed for the difference of those costs. But it is subject to like their discretion, to the Department of the Treasury and the IRS discretion. So I don't know what that means exactly. I don't know if anybody knows what that means exactly. I can dig more about that if there are specific questions, but that's the info I have on the federal paid leave. Yes, someone says, for employers with less than 50 being exempt from the 10-week extension, does that mean that there is not a 10-week limit or that they are not eligible for, oh, sorry, yes, thanks for that question. That means that for employers less than 50, if if offering 2/3 of full rate of pay for an additional 10 weeks for your employees because of child school or childcare closure because of COVID, if that causes undue hardship on your organization or your company, you may be exempt from offering that 10 weeks of paid leave. That's what that means. Did that clear that up? Okay. So more things under the federal rules, the federal federal protections for all of us, including survivors. Unemployment. So if you are eligible for unemployment right now, you get, if you're laid off, if you have enough hours, if you would normally be eligible for unemployment, you get your regular state benefit plus an additional $600 from the federal government, and that additional $600 right now has been approved through July 31st for folks who are applying for and getting unemployment through July 31st. Once your state benefit runs out, you get an additional 13 weeks. That's what the federal government says. You get an additional 13 weeks of unemployment once your state benefit runs out. Between now and December 31st, so this is another additional piece of it that was added into the CARES Act. Between now and December 31st, independent contractors, those who are self-employed, gig workers, this includes folks, who drive for Lyft or Uber, who are doing Instacart, who are, working a lot on those app-based like gig economy jobs, and part-time workers who don't have enough hours logged to otherwise be eligible for unemployment could be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. So it's sort of an additional unemployment that captures a larger group of folks, a larger group of workers than what traditional unemployment includes. I have a link here with checklists that really help you understand, like, if somebody might be eligible for unemployment and for which unemployment. Is it regular unemployment or is it pandemic unemployment? Who knows? But there's some checklists. It is good to know that these are the extra federal benefits, but everybody applies for unemployment through their state, right? So you would apply through the Employment Security Department here, through our state unemployment, and they have they are overwhelmed, they are backed up. It is taking weeks to get approved, and then sometimes you get approved and then they're like, oh no, we're going to review that, so we're going to put a hold on all your payments, and then you have to wait a few weeks for that as well. So there's a lot going on with unemployment right now. It's not this necessarily the smoothest procedure. We have a question. Does the pandemic unemployment assistance apply to individuals who are still working some, but their hours have been reduced due to COVID? Yes, there is some level of unemployment assistance available for some folks who are working, but their hours have been significantly reduced because of COVID. And again, at those checklists and the application online will help you, and which in the link here with the checklist, there's more information on how to apply as well. Those will help folks understand what they might be eligible for and what they might not be. I mean, when in doubt, apply. I mean, that's the thing here. Just apply for all the things. Apply for all the different kinds of unemployment insurance. Worst case scenario, you're denied, right? But but then when you're denied, then you have appeal power as well there, right? Then you can say, I disagree with this decision and this is why, right? So definitely, if you're working with folks, they're like, well, I don't know if I would qualify for unemployment because my hours were reduced, but I'm still sort of working, but barely, and it's not making ends meet. You can look through the checklist to see if you can deduce whether or not that person might be eligible. But I would still, I'm like, even if you aren't sure or you think maybe not, apply, right? Still a good idea. A few more resources of links. Again, you'll have this in your inbox soon after this webinar. So the Unemployment Law Project is a really great resource. They've got a page full of COVID information. They're actually pretty quick at responding to folks. They're like to people's questions, individuals' questions about like, hey, this is my situation. What should I do? They've been really great right now with all of this. And interestingly enough, one of my favorite blogs, Ask a Manager, also has a COVID page with a lot of this stuff just laid out with links and more information really clearly laid out for folks who are managers, administrators, program administrators. If you have like, want to find more information about your like how to help your employees around this stuff. Moving forward. Oh, nope, back. I'm trying to move my little chat window around so I can see my own notes. Okay. So the last thing that I want to talk about around the federal protections was this Paycheck Protection Program. Again, this might be more applicable to organizations and those of you who are administrators to organizations, but you also may be working with survivors who have small businesses and they're like, crap, what am I supposed to do right now? So the Paycheck Protection Program, you've probably already heard about. It has been around for a few weeks now, or maybe even a month or so, but it was in the news because a bunch of folks applied that like weren't small businesses and got Paycheck Protection, grants. And they're like, I think the Lakers were one of them. Like, why are you getting this? This is designed for small businesses. So some of those things have been ironed out. And what this does is it offers loans to small businesses of less than 500 employees to pay up to 8 weeks of payroll expenses, interest, mortgage, rent, and or other utilities. So those are the things you can use the grants for. The loans are they are loans. However, the loans are fully forgivable if 75% of them are used for payroll, full-time employment is not reduced, and salaries and wages are not decreased. So as long as you can prove that 75% went to payroll and you didn't make any changes to full-time employment and salaries and wages, then it becomes a grant essentially and not a loan. But it is technically a loan unless you use that 75% for payroll. And I have a link with more information as well. Oh, and Meta says for small for-profit businesses, we'll need to list the forgiven loan as income for purposes of calculating taxes owed. Thank you, Meta. Be sure when you're giving comments or questions to toggle the all panelists to all panelists and attendees so everybody can see that information. Unless it's a secret and you don't want anybody to see that information, but then Zoom chat is probably not the best place to be putting that stuff. So, State supports. Yay, there's our pretty Capitol building with all the tulips that probably nobody can see because we can't go anywhere. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the Changes to Work First program, which is our TANF program here in Washington State. So temporary assistance for needy families, often known as just welfare or cash assistance. So folks who are on TANF or Work First here in Washington, normally had to, work or look for work or find work or do job training programs and things in order to get their cash assistance. And that is problematic right now because a lot of people can't work. So time limit extensions, I wanted to say. So first up, participation has been suspended. So Work First participation was the things that folks who were on TANF had to do in order to get their cash grant. So like I said, it was often job training or work, or sometimes it was support group for survivors, right? Support group or meeting with their advocate one-on-one. So all those things. So right now, just participation has been suspended. They're not saying that folks can't participate. If they were doing things, if they were working on an online job training program already, and that can continue, they can continue to do that. But they're just not, they're not necessarily, they're not going to penalize anybody for not participating in the things that are written on their individual responsibility plans, which is the document that says, like, these are the things I'm going to do in order to get this cash grant. They're not penalizing anyone right now, and until the crisis, until they deem the crisis is over, right? That participation has been suspended. It was effective March 16th and is currently in effect. Similarly, time limit extensions have been widened. So right now there's a 60-month time limit, lifetime time limit, so 5 years on TANF. And there are several ways to get time limit extensions, and survivors could get an extension for having experienced domestic violence. But right now, what they're doing is DSHS has expanded that 60-month time limit extension for those experiencing hardship due to COVID-19. And that was effective April 1st. So if you are, coming up to your 60 months on TANF, but can't participate in the things that are going to get you back on your feet, right? Can't do the job training or can't do whatever it was that you were doing, then you qualify for a time limit extension. Oh, and I think I saw a hand raised, so let me go see if there's a question. Where, Lorena, I saw your hand go up, but now I can't find you in my list. Hang on. I unmuted you, Lorena, if you have a question.
No, I
Okay.
pushed it right. I'm sorry.
It's okay. All right. Okay. So that's participation has been suspended. Time limit extensions have been broadened to include those who are experiencing hardship due to COVID-19. Also effective March 16th, all participants have good cause for not cooperating because, and so won't be sanctioned, right? So nobody should be being sanctioned right now for not participating in their IRP. Again, it kind of goes along with participation suspended, but it's, to be super clear, DSHS should not be penalizing anyone, sanctioning anybody's check, kicking anybody off of TANF right now if they qualify for not participating, because the things that they have to participate in are probably not possible to do right now. In addition, workforce orientation, which was is a requirement right now, was something folks had to go do in person for the most part. All of those are being conducted over the phone now, and so there should not be a barrier to getting TANF because you haven't done workforce orientation. All right. So some folks qualify for TANF, but some folks don't. So there is also a program called Disaster Cash Assistance, DCAP, right now. And it is not much, but it is something that folks who are not eligible for any of the other things we've already talked about can be eligible for. So it's for folks who are not eligible for any other cash programs, not eligible for TANF, not eligible for unemployment. Basically, they've tried to apply and they've exhausted for all other possibilities. It's available to families in Washington and people without children, so with or without kids, who meet income and resource limit requirements. You have to have been living in Washington before the emergency declaration happened. And you have to first apply for all other cash assistance programs that you might be eligible for. The applicants are not required to meet citizenship requirements or provide a social security number for this assistance. It is a maximum one time in a 12-month period payment of $363. So like I said, is not a lot, but it's something. And folks can apply at washingtonconnection.org. So there's also an eviction moratorium here in Washington right now, a governor's directive, which is good. The statewide eviction moratorium goes through June 4th as of right now. And it prohibits evictions. It also prohibits raising rents and any threats or intimidations by a landlord regarding this action. It has been expanded to include not only evictions from sort of traditional rental properties, but also hotels and motels, lots or land parcels, transitional housing, and public campgrounds. Once the moratorium is lifted, landlords cannot consider unpaid rent as enforceable debt. They have to offer a payment plan that works for the tenant. However, unpaid rent is still owed. So the eviction moratorium doesn't absolve someone from owing the rent. That's still something I think a lot of advocates around are working on, trying to get some sort of relief from having to pay back rent owed, since it's just been so hard for so many folks to have income right now. So as of right now, the eviction moratorium just prevents folks from being evicted, like physically evicted, but they will owe the rent, the unpaid rent at some point. And landlords, once that moratorium is lifted, can't just immediately kick people out because they haven't paid. There's a little bit of protection in this eviction moratorium as it stands right now, that they have to work with tenants to create some sort of payment plan that works. They can't just like kick them out because they're like, oh, you didn't pay rent for the last 2 months. Okay. We have another, let's see, comment or question. If an individual received the economic stimulus, would they still be eligible to apply for disaster cash assistance, or would that disqualify them? That depends on how much money I think they had in the bank to begin with. So if that payment puts them over the threshold for income, then potentially. That's a good question though. I'm gonna find that out because sometimes those payments are excluded from income. So I'm gonna find out more if the stimulus payment. And then there was another question. Let me find it. Oh, Lorena says, who will help landlords to pay the mortgage? That is a good question, Lorena. And I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe somebody else on does. They can pipe in if they do. But you are, that's something that I think I'm not sure has been addressed yet by the governor or in any sort of large scale way. Oh, Kathy says you can have up to $6,000 in resources that for the disaster cash assistance. So that's good to know. So again, like if that $1,200 payment puts you over, it might mean that you don't qualify. But then again, sometimes these types of payments aren't included in countable resources. So that's the detail I want to figure out for y'all. Oh, I'm sorry. Susan says to recap what the DCAP benefit is. It is disaster cash assistance. Here, I'll go back to it. Disaster cash assistance. It is a little bit, it's a one-time in a 12-month period payment. So theoretically, if we're still under disaster order, right, this time next year, please, let's hope we aren't, but it's possible, then folks may be eligible again for this payment. But as of right now, it's a maximum one-time payment of up to $363 for folks who are not eligible for other cash programs. You have to sort of exhaust and apply for and be denied other programs in order to get disaster cash assistance. Something to note with disaster cash assistance is that applicants are not required to meet citizenship requirements or provide a social security number in order to get it. All right, and I'm going to find out more, Lorena, about what sort of help for landlords there might be around, paying mortgage payments because the eviction moratorium is happening. So people aren't necessarily paying rent. Oh, yes. Joyce just mentioned too that DCAP is not considered public charge. That's another really good point about DCAP. Folks can access it because it is disaster related. It does not qualify or count under what is considered someone being a public charge, which, if you don't know what that means, it's something that can prevent an immigrant from being eligible or being able to get a green card or citizenship if they're going through that process. And that what counts under public charge was recently expanded by this administration, by the Trump administration. So it is an important point that this DCAP is not considered public charge. It does not count under what is considered for someone being a public charge. So it really is available to folks who don't have access to a lot of other things. Thank you, Joyce. Moving forward. Rent and energy assistance. All right, so rent and energy assistance is available to some Washington residents for those who qualify for LIHEAP, which is a federal program. It's low income heating, energy, and assistance. Low income heating and energy assistance program. Can apply for benefits at their local community action program to get sort of emergency rent and energy assistance. The link has information about how to apply, where to apply, and that's just another way, another place for folks to get a little bit of help during this time. Okay. That's not everything that's out there. That's not all the new rules, because I couldn't fit it all into one webinar, but I wanted to sort of give an overview of some of the economic supports that were out there and available to folks. I would love to hear if you have more questions about what I've talked about. I would love to hear from you if you are what is out there that you have helped survivors access that I didn't cover. We'd love to share that with others. I would like to know what is coming up for survivors in your communities about this. How is this working? How is it not working? What do people need right now? Jennifer says, finding that survivors are often not getting their stimulus check payment. Oh, lots of questions. This is great. Okay. Are not getting their stimulus check payment because their abuser has seized it.
Yeah, I've gotten a few where they had a joint bank account. Now they're broken up. It went into the abuser's bank account and there's no way to go into court. Tried that because the courts are pretty much closed. In some courthouses, I think you probably could, but I'm dealing with Thurston County and they are not allowing people in for this purpose.
Oof. Yeah, that sucks. I don't know if anybody on, I have a few of my other Wiscative folks on as well. I don't know if any of y'all have some experience around this. I don't think Heather's on, who's our legal advocacy person, but I can send that question to her or that comment and see if we have any additional resources for folks around that. But that's, yeah, generally I mean, that's the hard thing when you're filing jointly. There are ways for the IRS will split it, like split refunds to up to 3 different accounts, but that had to have been set up right ahead of time. And if that wasn't set up, then getting it back out of there will be particularly tricky and may or may not even be something that some survivors feel safe like fighting. But it sounds like you're working with somebody who might want to. Is that the case, Jennifer?
Yeah, I've had a couple of them. The first one I tried to take it to court was unsuccessful, so I didn't even bother with the others. I've just had to say you have to wait until the courts allow this. I have contacted the court and said, would you consider doing this? But I've gotten no response back.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for this info. I will try to get more info out to you and everybody else about it. All right. Lorena, I think you had a question. I'm unmuting you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There is, I don't know if you know about this IRS form 8857.
I don't know it by the
Okay.
number. What is
Well,
it?
you know that, well, it's like, okay, it seems like a lot of abusers are joining taxes without the consent of the spouse or the partner, but they were filing taxes every year. So it's supposed that there is this IRS form 8857, which is a request for innocent support, spouse relief.
Yes.
And you can, I don't know if that is the one that you can file to IRS, allowing them to know that you were not signing that application for the taxes, and it's supposed that it's a crime, and they will charge them for this crime and send the money to the spouse that didn't file and didn't get any of those taxes returned.
Yes. So you can, like, if you're working with a survivor whose legal spouse has filed without them signing, without them knowing, there are steps you can take, and that might be the form.
Okay.
In fact, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look in a few minutes once I get off and I can toggle and get to I'm afraid if I start fooling with my screen now, I might lose you all. But I like back in February, I always do my February Money Talk is always on taxes, and I have resources around who to contact.
I missed it.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I have resources there on who to contact around innocent spouse relief. In fact, there are the forms, but there's also numbers you can call for taxpayer advocates that will help talk through whether or not that's something that makes sense in your particular case. And so, and I don't know, I would encourage you to contact the taxpayer advocates. I'm hoping they're working remotely. I'm sure they are super busy right now. So I don't know their capacity or what's happening there, but there is a resource out there to help survivors figure out if they need to file for innocent spouse relief. And what you're describing sounds like it might qualify. And those advocates are the people to talk to about that.
Thank you so much.
I will make sure that gets in the resource answers that we'll send out to everybody when I can collect them all. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, I'm scrolling down. From Susan, I see people's hours have been cut or jobs lost altogether, so they can't pay their rent. They've come to us for housing assistance, but there isn't any housing stock available. Yeah, I hear you. I'm sure that's a big problem. I don't know if I'm sure a lot of folks are dealing with that. I don't know if anybody has any information about how that might, like how they're dealing with that in particular in their communities that might be helpful. We're all ears about how, if there's our resources around that, But I think, you know, again, these sort of large scale issues that we're now seeing, right? The things that are coming up was what I was talking about earlier at the very beginning when I was trying to frame our conversation today around the opportunities that we have right now for making some big and deep changes to our system, because the sort of fragility of that system is being revealed. I mean, and it's always been there for certain people, right? It's like it hasn't worked for a lot of people, for a lot of Black and brown people and and immigrants in our communities, and unfortunately, a lot of folks don't pay attention to that because of it's not affecting them. But now it's affecting a lot more people, and we have an opportunity to say, hey, like, don't you think people deserve heftier safety nets? Don't you think people deserve safe housing? And so, you know, I think now is the time to talk to your local officials, talk to your state elected officials, tell them that these things are vital to survivors and to everybody in our communities, that we're all safer when people have enough money and safe roofs over their heads. You know, using those messages and, like, you know, being loud and sending those messages as the upstanding organizations that you are in your communities, can be powerful. And now's the time to start having those conversations and start talking about that. Okay, let's see, I'm just going down the list here, so I'll get to everybody. Meta says, I imagine there are additional resources being offered at the county level and for some bigger cities at the city level. Advocates should check their city and county websites to see if there are additional, oh God, for some reason it won't scroll, to see if there are additional forms for emergency and disaster relief available. Excellent advice, Meta. That, yeah, look at your county and at your city level websites to see if there are more types of emergency relief available. I read Amazon is not accepting new customers for online grocery delivery. Any update? Question for DV advocates. Are there any staff who are considered essential workers receiving hazard pay? Good question. So 2 questions there. I don't know the answer about emergency grocery delivery or the Amazon online grocery delivery. I don't know. So if you know the answer to that and can put it in the chat, that would be great. And so Joyce is also asking of y'all if anybody is receiving hazard pay. There are staff who are considered essential workers at DV programs. That, you know, for and I don't know, Jake might be able to say a little bit more about that. He's on, but that, like, there are DV advocates who can be considered essential workers. I believe it has to do with shelter advocates specifically, but I could be wrong about that. I don't know who might be receiving hazard pay. We've had some questions about that from folks, like from different programs wanting to offer hazard pay, but not exactly knowing how to do that. And I do think there are some folks out there, some programs out there offering hazard pay. So additional dollars per hour for wage workers, because they are essential employees that are having to work. Susan asked Meta if you could give examples of resources being offered by cities and counties. If you know of anything concrete, Meta, you can put that in the chat. And let's see. Susan, you're asking about WSCDF's legislative agenda. We don't have a legislative agenda for next session just yet. So I think what I said earlier stands, you know, like any general statements, information to your local and state lawmakers about how economic supports, how good, robust leave practices, how social safety nets are absolutely crucial to survivors, will really set the stage for whatever we end up specifically going forward on our legislative agenda next year. I anticipate there will be, we have supported in the past the Working Families Tax Credit, and I anticipate that will be something that we will continue to be supporting, but we're not sure what that will even look like yet next year. So no specifics, but whatever your organization can do to elevate the connection between money and economic resources, and how that makes us all more secure and safer and more stable in our communities, is fantastic, and can really just like set the stage for whatever we're doing come January in session. Okay, Meta says that she doesn't have specific examples, but I've heard from that different ordinances like eviction moratoriums or relief packages being passed by some cities and counties, Spokane, Seattle, King, Pierce. So it might be worth checking. Jake doesn't know the answer about hazard pay, he says, but we're looking into it. Let us know if your program is offering hazard pay. That's something we would love to hear. If your program is offering hazard pay, we would love to know how that's going, how you did it, what are your questions, what are the barriers, what are, all of those things. We would love to know that. You can contact me. My information will be in the PowerPoint. It's just tracy@wiskative.org with that information, and I'll share it with the other folks at on coalition staff who are thinking about this as well. So Susan has some information about hazard pay. So state grants or counties allows for employees to receive hazard pay. Unfortunately, those in their agency that are working on COVID quarantine isolation for people who are awaiting their test results are not. I'm not sure I understand what you mean there, Susan. So if they don't test positive, because hazard pay is just for work, like it shouldn't have anything to do with whether or not you are like you get COVID or not. Hazard pay, I thought, was just about because we recognize that this job right now has increased risk. We're going to offer you more money per hour. That's how I understand it. So I'm not sure what you mean about the COVID testing, if you want to clarify. Okay, the employees doing the work of managing that program are not getting paid hazard pay, although state funding allows it. Oh, okay. Yeah, if you have more information about your organization's offering hazard pay, we'd love to collect that at Wiskative and be able to, help support you in that, help dig to find answers to questions around that, and also then if you've got a good model, help amplify that for other programs. All right, whoops, that's it. Thought I had a thank you slide, but I don't. But I do thank you. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing right now. It is really hard right now. For all of us, for everybody doing this work in particular, it's always a hard job. It's particularly a hard job right now. Y'all are amazing. You are rock stars. Please let me know how I can support you in this work. It is super duper hard, especially right now. Take care of yourselves. Have a lovely week. Hope to hear from you soon.